Marketer of the day, number 468. Reverse engineer success. Meetups, cold calling, and deal flow with Alex Berman. Hey everyone, we're so glad that you're listening. We're talking right now with Alex Berman. Now, who is Alex Berman? Well, he's the person that's going to tell us how to go from entrepreneur to business owner. And Alex is the founder and president of Experiment 27. Alex is responsible for generating over $6.5 million in B2B sales and over $35 million in leads for his clients. And he also creates weekly videos to help agency owners grow their business and bring in more revenue, teaching them how to optimize B2B sales cycles and put inbound marketing strategies in place. And he's also a former director of marketing at the 60-person, three-time Inc. 5000 agency in New York City. So all kinds of fun stuff. Glad to be talking to you, Alex.
Yeah, for sure. I got to update that bio. That agency's over 100 people now. They just won for the fourth time.
Jeez.
Yeah, and those numbers are a lot higher too. Man, but I'm always, and actually I'd love to get your opinion on this as somebody who hosts a podcast yourself. What do you think about people putting numbers in their podcast bio, like sales numbers and stuff?
Personally, I love it. It separates people who don't know what they're talking about from those who do, I think.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I'm kind of I'm still evolving on that. I don't know if I should take them out or not. I've been cringing recently when I hear them.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, right? Like as long as it doesn't go on for too long, and it kind of shows off your best stuff, and we can kind of choose to dive in on that.
Cool.
So, I mean, what's on your mind recently? Like, I mean, do you think there's a secret for why you do super great and a lot of people still struggle? Or like, is there something that you do that makes you unique and stand out and special?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, the biggest thing that caused us to succeed, I guess in quotes, because there's still like, a lot to go. But the biggest difference between what I was doing before and what we're doing at Experiment 27 is that we picked a niche. So we do marketing services for other digital agencies. So we help other agencies grow. And before we were doing marketing services for everyone, SaaS companies, anyone in B2B. And it really was making that decision to pick that specific niche that caused the growth.
And what niche is that?
Agencies. So we're an agency that markets other agencies.
Okay, and so, like I hear about that kind of thing all the time. Like people say, things were going a certain way, and then we really like cut out all the fat or really focused on this one kind of niche. And so, I mean, do you think do you wish that you'd focused on the niche in the beginning, or do you think that serving everyone at first kind of made you figure things out, and maybe you wouldn't have narrowed down that niche if you hadn't kind of done it the wrong way first?
Well, I think in terms of career trajectory, it was good to try a bunch of stuff before I started a company. So like you read, I was director of marketing. Before that, I was like a junior cold caller. I was a sales guy. I sold marshmallows. I did consulting for restaurants. So like I think that's where the testing should come in. But yeah, once I was director of marketing for an agency, it was pretty clear that the agency market was where I delivered the most value.
Awesome. So the more you moved up, the more you realized like where you need to go.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm all for testing a bunch of stuff, but I think most of the testing should take place on other people's dime, and the easiest way to do that is by actually having a day job first.
Right. I mean, I completely agree, and I love that. And I went through a similar process there as far as like I worked a day job as a computer programmer, and at that job, I learned all these skills about software management and project management and things like that. And then I was then able to use those same skills to make plugins, make apps, and things like that. But at the time, I didn't realize. At the time, I thought I was just kind of wasting time or having to switch gears, but didn't realize that I was building all these skills that I could use forever and ever for the rest of my life. And it sounds like you had something similar going on.
Yeah. So that agency became our first client, the one you were talking about in the bio, and the founder was super nice. He did a video case study for us. Like he did all this stuff that helped us grow. So having a good relationship with your boss, or with having a good relationship with my boss, also helped.
So, I mean, what was that exact journey like? Like you started as the cold caller selling marshmallows, and then how did things evolve from there? Was it a situation of like you had a plan to quit, or did you get sick of it, or just outgrow it, or how did you go from point A to point B?
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't cold calling selling marshmallows. I was cold calling selling. It was like a Groupon clone. So we had to cold call like karate studios, pottery studios, that sort of stuff. And I didn't really like doing it, but I did it for about 6 months. Then I tried to do marketing consulting. That's where I ended up selling marshmallows. for my stepbrother's business. So I was like running a kiosk in the mall during the holiday season, and then from there, yeah, I ended up at this agency, the one from the bio, where I was a junior sales guy. We had a team of 3 salespeople, plus the founders, so 2 founders on top of that, and we were sharing about 14 inbound leads a month, 14. And that was not nearly enough because our goals were each $750,000, and some people's goals were 1.25 million. So I realized pretty early that I wasn't going to be able to hit my goals with our lead flow. Like, it was just impossible. So I went out and I started a meetup group. I started doing cold emailing. I started being extremely aggressive, like booking myself in as many half-hour meetings as I possibly could. And basically, I beat my goal that first year of 750, and the founder of the company just took notice. And I've also, hard pitched him as well on becoming director of marketing. But from there, yeah, we were able to increase the lead flow from 14 to 40, and then up to 140 leads a month, which was crazy. And actually, the first year that I was director of marketing, in that testimonial, the founder said we increased the business by 16%, which for them was a little over $1 million in leads that wouldn't have existed otherwise, like in closed business. So it was just like hardcore hustling, man, trying to figure it out, trying to get things done.
Yeah, that's great. So basically you realized that there was no way that the math was going to work out. You needed to have more water coming in the faucet, so to speak. And I've, for whatever reason, I've kind of heard that again and again recently, that kind of lesson that, like, everyone talks about with the so-called like hustle or pound the pavement or things like that. But I heard something recently that, like, well, it's good to hustle, but you should do that as far as the networking, as far as getting out there. And a lot of people are working these 12-hour days, but they're just playing around on the computer. They're not actually going out and talking to people they need to be talking to. They're not getting those new leads, and they think they're hustling, but they're not getting the new leads coming in.
Well, I think hustle's kind of a buzzword now as well. It's really just about owning your number. So, some of the other people on the sales team, like there's one guy who was there at the same time as me, who also had a goal of 750, but he had no plan on how to get there. Right. Instead, I looked at my number. I was like, all right, 750,000. Let's say it's an average of $75,000 per close. That means I need 10 people to close this year. Right. I knew I only needed 10 people to close. But in order to get 10 people, let's say it's a 25% close rate. So I need to have at least 40 meetings. And then if I blew that out of the water, let's say I got 100 meetings, I should easily break the goal. So then the goal just became, how do I get 100 meetings with qualified people?
That's an awesome way of thinking about it. And so where did those numbers come from? Did you calculate like those initial numbers, like the 750,000? Did you just like think of a number, or did you calculate, or where did that starting point come from?
The 750 was our sales goal. So that came from our director of sales. He was my boss at the time, director of biz dev.
Okay, so the other salespeople were like, well, 750, great. That's a pie in the sky. They were just crossing their fingers, hoping that it would work out. And then you reverse engineered and backtracked. Okay, well, based on that, I'd have to sell this many and I have to close at this percentage, which means at this meeting. And that's like the bare minimum to hit that goal. So then if I completely exceed that goal, then that stacks the deck in my favor. And so as far as that thinking, that thought process is, do you think there's a reason why you were thought in that way and other people didn't in your team?
In the team, I think it had a lot to do with the culture. So my boss at that particular time, like the CEO was great, but I wasn't working for the CEO. My boss at that particular time wasn't. He was one of these sales guys that had to own a number at the same time. So a lot of what he was doing was closing his own deals versus coaching the team. So there were just some flaws, I think, in the hierarchy there, or in the assigned roles. So I think that led to a little bit of poor management, and it also led to him competing with the actual sales team for deals, which is not a good place for a company to be.
Yeah, and it sounds like lack of focus too.
Lack of focus as well. Well, okay, so lack of focus also comes into play for any agency, because when you're dealing with when you're dealing with custom app development, basically you can develop apps for any sort of company, right? B2B, B2C, startups, enterprise, whoever. So lack of focus in terms of management, but then it's also lack of focus in terms of targeting. One of the reasons I succeeded is because I started a meetup that was branded marketing managers, and I literally only went after branded marketing managers that I felt like were Fortune 1000 companies.
And what was the reasoning behind making the meetup? Because I imagine that, like, maybe someone else in your situation might have said, well, I'm a phone guy. I learned these skills. I'm just gonna, use the skills I know. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. What was the reasoning behind doing more than that and branching out and having the meetup?
So I was at a meetup for somebody else's thing, and they were telling me the story of how they started their meetup and then they got like a job within like 2 weeks or something crazy like that. So just at 3 a.m. one morning, I just woke up and made this group, and yeah, Meetup started pushing it out. But for me, I was never really good at talking to people, especially face to face. And I just figured if I was a Meetup founder or whatever, Meetup organizer, I would have to talk to people constantly. And our meetups ended up being about 150 people every single month. So it ended up being cool for that aspect. And then, yeah, it was just like, it was just kind of something that happened. It wasn't really that strategic.
But then it became strategic in
Yeah,
hindsight, right?
it became strategic in hindsight. So the first couple months I was running it, it really was just networking. I was trying to get a job. But then when I got a job, it quickly became every single person I meet, I'm going to ask them what they do and then try to find some way that we could end up with a meeting on the calendar.
Awesome.
And typically these meetups, they would end up, I was disappointed when I didn't get $50 to $100,000 in leads from each meetup.
From every single one. Oh, geez. Sounds like you're too hard on yourself. I haven't been to two meetups, and too many meetups, but I've been to like a few. And one thing that I hear from a lot of the meetups, like I was at one, and the person said like, well, she has 2,500 people registered, but any particular meeting, it was a struggle to get even 20. So, is there anything special you think you did to fill that meetup up, or was it just living in a big city or something?
So we were in New York, 2,500, and having only 20 show up is really low. Typically, for a free event, you'll get about 30% of RSVPs to show up. And then for a paid event, it's about like 90%. So even charging like $1 or $2 for a ticket, we did a couple paid events where it was like $5 a ticket just to get the numbers up. But for us, yeah, we had a free event. I think it was just that we threw it at a bar. So it was in this place called the Art Bar in New York City, and we were just in the back room, and it was just at a good time. It was after work on a Tuesday, so a lot of people would just stop by. It was right near the part of town where a lot of the brand and marketing managers were as well.
Well, great. And is there anything that you had to figure out with the meetups? Like, did the first one just go super smoothly, or were there things that you wish you'd known about that going in?
Yeah. So the main thing I had to learn was. So a lot of the hesitations I had going into it were, one, I thought I had to like rent a space, but we ended up just jumping in, and I never talked to the bar owners one time through the whole like 3 years I ran this meetup. Two was I was wondering like how people would show up to the meetup, and I was very worried nobody would come. Nobody came to the first one we did. It was just me sitting in the corner alone, drinking like a whiskey sour or whatever, and nobody came. And then the next one though, Meetup, I don't know if they still do this, but at the time they helped promote the new meetups. So by the second meetup, we were at like 30 or 40 people.
Okay. And so did you do anything on your own? Like, did you run Facebook ads or anything like that to beef up those numbers?
No, the only thing I did on my own was before I would every single meetup try to make everybody have a good time. So I would try to meet everybody and just act like the host. That was literally that was the most proactive I was. And then I would also try to book meetings with them as well if it made sense. But otherwise, yeah, just trying to make sure they all had a good time.
Well, super cool. And did you have a structure like some of these meetups do, or was it just show up whatever discussion happens?
No, it was just show up. Sometimes I would do like a little talk at the beginning, like, hey, welcome to the meetup. But I stopped doing that after like the first two. And then, no, it just became like a networking event. Everyone would just come. They'd all have their own drinks. Little circles of people would form. And then I would just go from circle to circle, welcoming people, talking to them.
That's super cool. And then, what next thing I want to know about is the thing that you mentioned about, so you got really good at meeting people one-on-one and getting some kind of appointment, some kind of a meeting on the calendar. So what was there to figure out there? Like, do you have like a process now, or like a strategy for if you meet someone? Like, do you have like a specific plan for getting to the end of that conversation, or is it just a matter of like you've done it enough now where you can just kind of feel them out?
Sure. Well, it's not Okay, so it's not talking to people for the express purpose of getting a meeting, right? And it's not getting meetings if it doesn't make sense. But normally, what I'll do is I'll ask them what they do, and almost 100% of the time, like, yeah, that's the cliche answer, or that's the cliche question everyone asks at a meetup, right? What do you do? But because that's the cliche question, everyone has answers ready. And then from there, they'll usually talk about their business. I ask 3 or 4 questions deep about like what their company is. And then, yeah, and then they would always ask what I did. And I would say, I do mobile application development and web development. We worked with, these 3 companies like Tyson, Power Rangers, whatever I would say. And then they would be like, oh, that's cool. Or they would ask deeper questions. Like it's very natural once you get into that conversational flow, especially if you've asked like 3 or 4 questions about their business. Because from there, you can kind of construct the whole pitch for them.
Okay, and what does that sort of pitch look like? Like, is it light on detail? Like, let's just focus on here's the calendar link, or let's get a meeting scheduled right now, or like how I guess like how detailed is that the ending in that conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm always a big fan of having fun at these meetups. I never want to do like real work. So all I'll do is get them intrigued enough, so they know we do mobile applications. They know we do websites based on that 1 or 2 sentences that I was saying. And then yeah, I'll just get their business card and follow up the next day. What I've with a simple like, hey, really enjoyed talking about fancy wines with you or whatever, something they brought up in the conversation. Would love to keep talking about the app idea. Uh, do any of these times work? Or would love to keep talking about the app idea, if that makes sense. Just something really quick, because what I found is, I would leave these meetups. I would leave these meetups with maybe, 40 or 50 cards, because I talked to everybody and I would try to get everybody's card, regardless of whether they're qualified or not. And I was sending out these emails, but I would rarely receive emails from other people that I would meet. Like I was always the one reaching out. And so the insight I had there is if I'm not receiving emails and I'm the host of the meetup, I would say most people are not receiving these emails, right? So most people go to meetups, they meet people, and then they never follow up, or they follow up even weeks later. So that was the biggest key for me is closing the meetings the next morning when I was still hungover, back when I used to drink.
Well, cool, yeah, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. Number one, that you followed up right away. You followed up, and well, I mean, first of all, the fact that you followed up at all, because like I've noticed that as well. Like I used to, and honestly, I used to be the kind of person where I'd go to some kind of event, like even like a 3-day event, and I'd come back with 5 or 10 business cards, and I thought I was hot stuff. And then usually that would end up being like 1 or 2 people I could do business with. But more recently, now that I have like this podcast, I'm more in the mindset of I want to get everyone's business card, sort of like you said. Like I want to get everyone's business card. I want to, if it makes sense for them to come on my podcast, stuff like that. So that way I have more, I talk to them more. But I like how number one, you follow up at all, which, like you said, most people don't do. Number two, you follow up right away the next morning. And then I heard a little bit in there of you'll remember, or at least like maybe write down on the card a little bit about what you spoke about. Because I imagine meeting 50 people, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
hard to even keep that straight. And a lot of people don't have their picture on their business card either. And then I like the phrasing of it. It's like, okay, we enjoyed talking about this. And then you didn't make it awkward. It was like, I love to keep talking about blank, if that makes sense. So it wasn't just like, oh, great talking about wines. Do you want an app? Like you kind of already laid the seeds a little bit in the conversation. And then the email is just, okay, do you want to keep talking about that?
Yeah, exactly. And that writing things down on the business cards was huge. I think I got that from Leo Lowndes, who wrote How to Talk to Anyone About Anything. Read that back in college, and it like really helped with that sort of stuff.
And yeah, and what's that book again? How to Talk to Anyone About Anything?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. I mean, I'll link to that, and I'll read that one. That sounds super awesome. So yeah, so you had the business card, and then you sent these emails out. And do you know like what your reply rate on that was?
It was almost 100%. It was really, really high, especially because I was only emailing people when it made sense. So I was only emailing people when we talked about an app or a website, which, like I was talking about before, was about, 50 to $100,000 worth of people, which could be, 4 or 5 people. And no, it was almost 100%. Very, very close to 100%.
And then, so how did that conversation go? It would just be like, you say, I enjoyed talking about this, love to keep it going. And then they'd reply and you'd send them, or no, you'd send an email saying, do any of these times make sense? So they would just reply saying, like, time number 2 sounds great.
Yeah, then I would just put them on the calendar, and then we do our normal agency discovery call process.
Super great. So just moving them through the machine. And real quick, like, what was that discovery call format like for you?
So back then, it was a bunch of questions that were written out by the company. What we do now at Experiment 27 is I'm always a big fan of trying to diagnose their issues kind of like a doctor would. So instead of going in like the normal agency process and just showing them like 500 case studies or whatever, showing them background on the company, what I'll normally do during these discovery calls is start with less than 20 seconds on Experiment 27 and what we do, then ask them a bunch of questions about, whatever it is we're diagnosing. So when I was selling apps, it was all about like, do you guys have an app right now? Or if I'd done research, I'd known they have an app, and I would still ask just to get that verification. Or I would ask like, if the app's around marketing, I'd say, what do you guys do for marketing right now? And basically any question that was necessary to ask to figure out the issue. Because I'm not a big fan of pitching just for the sake of pitching, right? I'm always a fan of diagnosing an issue if there is an issue and then trying to provide real value. And then what I'll do is every time they'd answer a question, especially if they hit keywords, like if they said, oh yeah, we tried iOS in the past and the developers went AWOL on us. And then I would say something like, oh, were you using an American team? And then I would know for a fact, because 90% of the time they weren't, they would say, oh no, we outsourced it to India or China. And yeah, the development quality was really low quality. Like the people just wouldn't talk to us. Sure, it was cheap, but the app would break down every time. And then that led me right into a pitch about like, using US labor because we were fully a US firm. And then also, like telling a little bit of a story about when it's worked in the past for another client.
Super cool. So instead of just hitting them over their head with all this stuff, you asked all those little questions to feel them out and then find the thing to pick up on that it seemed was the real issue, and then kind of dove deep into that sort of response.
Yeah, it was basically holding all of our case studies in my head and then waiting for them to prompt something that would make the case study relevant rather than just presenting all the case studies in a row.
Yeah, that's super cool because you might be, if you list all those, there might be like 5 good case studies, but they only care about one, and then so you're just kind of listening around for the right one and then giving them that semi-customized thing for them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm so against using decks as a presentation technique, because unless you're maybe like 3 or 4 meetings deep and you're presenting to like corporate, like we just had someone present to TV Land and they had to use a deck and it was like a presentation to a team of like 25 or something crazy. But if you're still at the early stages, still trying to learn, the conversation's too fluid to be able to know where that's going to go to use a deck.
Well, and so would you say that this whole process that you've explained of, going to networking events, whether you host them or go to someone else, you go there, you get some leads, you get these calls scheduled, you have them on the discovery call, you pitch them on, or you fill them out, see if it's a good fit, you pitch them on something. Do you think this is your secret? I mean, do you think that every business in the world needs to be doing this?
What's my secret? To connect to people like a human? Yeah, well, sure. That's my secret.
Well, yeah, like and I mean, well, you say that kind of laughing a bit, but I mean, we both know, like, and I'm guilty of this for sure, of sometimes hiding behind the computer screen, putting up some landing pages, sending out some email broadcasts, putting out the Facebook ads, the AdWords, and then making some money, but then always feeling like I could get a ton more money off the table if only I'd do a little bit of what scares me, which might scare me at first to be awkward, but once I get some of these more like, networking skills or phone closing skills figured out for a lot of these people, once we get these skills figured out, then we'll have a lot more results as opposed to kind of struggling with it the hard way.
Yeah, there's this book called Traction, and it has this framework called the bullet hook framework. And basically what they say in this book is we all have our strengths as marketers. For me, at the time, it was cold calling. For you, it sounds like it might be Facebook ads and stuff like that. But just because we have those strengths doesn't mean that is what's going to actually grow our business. So yeah, the way to succeed and where I think we found our success, how we found our channels, is actually making it a point to go out and try things that we don't have the skills in right away, and learning those, maybe doing it over 2 to 4 weeks, and actually testing each channel individually.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. That's huge because there might be things that skills that either we are good at or that we landed on just from whatever randomness happened to us at life, but that might not be the best bang for our buck. And so I'm really curious. So now that we kind of heard about your process, how did you scale that, or is that a whole other conversation?
Yeah, how did I scale? So originally, what I did was I sat down. So after I decided to go all in on Experiment 27, I was the CMO at another startup before that went under, which I think I might have covered on Entrepreneur on Fire. But after that, when I was trying to put the pieces back together and start a company, I sat down and I pretended like I was writing a book. I literally went back and I was like, all right, what are all the common threads? What are the 8 channels, the 9 channels that worked at this past company? And I wrote them out, and they're still up on the Experiment 27 site. Like, we still use all those same channels, and basically was working backwards from each one. From there, I had another guy on my team who I used for writing content, Robert, who eventually became the CEO at Experiment 27, but at the time was just this guy who was doing content, and I relied on him to do the work. So I was like, all right, Robert, I'm going to sell as much as I possibly can, and then you follow this process or create your own process, whatever is necessary to get it done. And we'll split all the revenue 50-50. So that's how it was for about 3 months. Me and him were like fucking ballers for a while, just collecting all of this cash. And then eventually, yeah, we realized that the 50-50 split wouldn't work if we actually wanted to scale. So me and him started taking a salary. It was small. I think it was $3,000 a month each. And we were using 100% of what was left to hire people.
Well, dang. And how did you? I mean, how did you guys come to that sort of decision? Was it just like, did one of you have some kind of like business background, or like, I mean, how did you, or was it that traction book, or like, how did you make that? Because I mean, I'm sure it was tempting, especially at a young age, right, to like keep all the money and buy a huge big house. But like, what led to that decision to change to the model of you guys having that salary and kind of thinking more towards the future?
I think it was laziness. I didn't really want to do sales. I don't think he wanted to do the work. So, what's the easiest way to sustain a business when you don't want to work, right? It's to hire people.
Super funny. And
Also,
yeah,
dude, in the first month, I think I banked so much money. Like, I bought a Prius, I bought a car, and it was the first time I'd ever bought a car in my life, and I just kind of felt like I won. I was like, all right, yeah, I know what this is like now. Might as well build something sustainable.
right. What's the point in winning big once? You'd rather win again and again over time. And also, nothing wrong at all with laziness. Bill Gates says, if I want a job done, I'd hire a lazy person to do it, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really true. I think if somebody's lazy, they're going to be able to approach problems in a different way.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when computer and app programming is involved, where they, instead of taking the brute force way, they might grab the library to do it or find the algorithm to do it, as opposed to trying to reinvent all this stuff. They'll just do the so-called lazy way of just plugging the pieces in together.
Well, so that was the initial thought, but then what I found was the people that I hired not only wanted to work a lot harder than I did, but were also way more passionate about each thing. So like Lael right now, who runs our customer success, he loves client meetings. I could never sit there and like go back and forth with clients. Like, I could do it like physically, but I just didn't like doing it. Robert, who's the CEO now, he loves management. Whereas before he was doing, the tactical, like writing everything out point by point, which he didn't like. He really loves the one-on-ones. So he's really passionate there. Like Patrick, who runs our sales, loves selling, and he loves scaling the sales team. So while it started as something that was lazier, what I realized is I'm actually bettering my own employees or my own contractors' lives by putting them in these spots, because they're having a really good time doing the things that they want to do.
And why is that? Like, why is there so much enthusiasm? And I mean, it sounds sort of like maybe you allowed job roles to change or something like that. I mean, what's the secret to getting the right people for the right jobs here?
Yeah, well, so we do an interview process that requires them to do about a month of work for half the salary or for half the payment before they jump into the full, monthly payment. I think that might help, but I also think that people, a lot of the times, they know what they want, We've also fired fast, so we might spend 3 or 4 weeks looking at a candidate and then fire them in the first week if they're not performing. So like the core team of like 15, 16 people we have now, really want to be here. And yeah, people are just passionate about different stuff.
Well, super great. Well, sounds like a well-oiled machine. And I want to make sure that everyone hears about Experiment 27 and everything you got going on. So first of all, if someone's listening to our conversation today and they say, I want to go and check out Alex's app agency and I want to go and hire him for stuff, how do people know if they're a right fit to reach out and contact you?
Yeah, so if you're an agency, let's say you're anywhere from 500,000 to 20 million plus in revenue, and you do custom application software, back end, front end, or UX, UI design. We have some advertising agencies. If you run any business like that, check out experiment27.com. Otherwise, for free stuff, a lot of stuff like the content we've gone over today, we do 3 videos a week over at b2bsalestraining.org. That'll go to the YouTube channel.
All right, so b2bsalestraining.org and then experiment27.com, depending on if you want that sales training or if you, so did I hear you right? If they do UI design, that's the type of people that should reach out to you on that app page?
So anyone who's in the creative agency space, so UI, UX, branding, advertising, mobile app development, back-end web, anything like that. If they're listening to this, they know what they are. They know if they're qualified.
All right, super great. So go to experiment27.com or b2bsalestraining.org, depending on which of those paths that you want to go down. And as we're winding things down here, Mr. Alex, is there any number one best piece of advice that you've ever given, or something that you wish you could go back in time and send to your past self? Anything come to mind like that?
The biggest piece of advice, or not even really advice, the biggest thing that I've found that made the biggest difference was not doing the actual production work myself. So hiring Robert, in a way, even though he just started as a content guy, was the smartest thing I've ever done so far. So stop doing things yourself is the piece of advice that I'm giving. If you're strongest in sales, sell and only do sales. Don't worry about production. There's millions of people that would love to do the art side of it.
I love it. So focus on your strengths and hire out to fill in the weaknesses.
Sure, yeah.
Well, super great. So we'll see you guys over at experiment27.com and or b2bsalestraining.org. And thanks so much, Alex, for stopping by and sharing just tons of great ahas, takeaways, interesting stories, case studies, all kinds of great stuff. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Robert.
Have you heard of Google? How about Google Calendar, Google Drive, or Gmail? Do you struggle mastering these powerful but sometimes scary technologies? Our new book, The Checklist Mindset, makes it simple. It's the next best thing to hiring a full-time virtual assistant. Claim your copy of our book on Kindle at www.checklistmindset.com.